Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is the KUDO community meeting. Just a reminder, we do have a code of conduct, which you can find on the kudo.dev website. I'm Matt Jarvis. I'm hosting today's meeting. This is the first one I've hosted, so please bear with me. I'm sure we'll have there may be things that I forget. The agenda is in the shared Google Doc, which hopefully everyone has access to. I will just post that link in the chat here in Zoom as well. So today's agenda, we'll have a 25-minute section as usual from an update on OpenKEPs and discussion of any new KEPs. And then 10 minutes at the end for any open discussion and wrap up. So I guess we'll just kick off straight to the agenda. And first thing we have on there is the application Operator CRD, that's KEP 2. Does anybody have anything want to talk about around that?
I think that would be Jared, but he can't make it. Maybe he joins later today. So maybe we skip that one.
Okay, let's move on.
The fix for upstream Kubernetes did get in actually a couple days ago. That was one of the issues up with KEP 2. We couldn't do dynamic, well, we could do dynamic CRDs, but we had trouble watching when you delete and reinstall a framework. So that fix actually went in. So I think once that rolls out to next version of Kubernetes 1.15, we should be able to leverage that.
When would be 1.15? In 2 weeks or when is?
I don't know. I don't know. When did you guys cut the last release?
Yeah, I think the next one is like 1 month ahead or something like that. So
Good to know. All right.
Okay, shall we move on? Okay, so next on the agenda, Framework Developer CRD update. That's assigned to KEP 10, I think.
yeah, I think Ken is on vacation. I'm not sure whether this is the same thing as KEP 9 or
Yeah, I was slightly confused
fuzzy
about
on
this
that.
as well.
Tom, do you know? Or
I saw it this morning too.
it's like it reads like KEP 9, but
yeah.
Yeah, so I believe the difference between the two was audience, if I remember correctly.
what was the difference?
The audience.
Oh, audience. Okay.
I
see.
God, sorry, let me open things. Because Jared just put up a PR today, which I think renamed this to KEP 9 because we didn't have a KEP 9.
Yep, that's the one I saw go through. Yeah, was KEP 9.
Oh, that's a brand new one, right? So KEP 9 is for the framework developer experience. And KEP 10, which is the one Ken put up, yes, Jared just renumbered them.
What was the reason for renumbering?
You didn't have a 9 before.
Okay.
I believe that's, yeah.
Oh, so is this? Is this one about the CLI? This new one?
The new ones, some discussions we had today about, and over the last several weeks, about what it looks like for a framework developer to create a framework version inside of KUDO, and what that experience looks like.
Yeah,
So,
I can give like a brief update of that KEP.
That would be great. Yeah.
Let me share the screen. All right. So yeah, this is the KEP 9. It came in today, so it's super fresh. It's like the coolest hot stuff that's like out there. So yeah, it's just like it's operator toolkit, but as Tom said, I feel like it's more like directed towards the developers of the frameworks. So as Tom said, like we discussed a lot, like what should be the end experience of the developer, like what kind of like YAMLs or like stuff in general they should submit when they define a framework. And this is basically the outcome of that discussion. So right now, like how it looks like is that the framework developer basically has to provide the YAMLs that like correspond to the CRDs. That's basically like one-to-one to the storage layer that we use in Kubernetes. We want to like extend that and make it like more nicer to the developer. And the way that we decided to go is to take like a huge inspiration in Helm actually. So we decided to like not reinvent the packaging and like learn from Helm as much as possible. So this is like the proposal of like how the package with the framework is going to look like. It's like if you know like the structure of Helm chart, this will be like very familiar to you. So there's like an operator YAML that's basically the extension of Helm that we're providing. That's like the most interesting part of the whole package. That's where the tasks and plans and phases are defined.
Quick question.
Yeah,
you said
go ahead.
phases. I saw that we don't have phases in there and we wanted to get rid of phases because they're kind of redundant or not needed. I saw that real quick.
Yeah, Jared, yeah, basically I had like a 10-minute sync with Jared and he told me that we are basically going away from phases and we want to use like Kubernetes primitives instead of introducing phases on top of that.
That's why we don't see phases in this one as well,
yeah,
right?
I don't have more to say than that to it, but yeah.
Okay.
That's the current thinking.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we want to use like pod disruption budgets instead of like introducing a new phases thingy here.
All right.
So this is just the definition of how all the different YAML files split out from each other, right? And standardizing that.
Yeah, this is basically what the framework developer is going to provide. And this is the package that you're going to basically install as like the operator or user of the framework.
Now, it's not necessarily the storage mechanism inside of Kubernetes CRD, though. And I think Elena alluded to that. Right now, that's a one-to-one mapping. Right now, we're standardizing the developer experience. We'll map onto our current CRDs, I believe. And we can change the internal CRDs independently of how the framework developer experience proceeds.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, exactly. So this doesn't talk about the storage layer at all. This is just the end user experience. There's the params YAML. Yeah, I will just go over the rest so that it's like complete. So there's the params YAML. That's basically the same thing that was in the previously. So when you are creating an instance, you are providing a parameters. So this is like the same idea. So you're gonna, too many tabs. So yeah, the params YAML is just like enumeration of parameters. We were thinking about adding the secrets. That was like a very good point that Matt gave us, that we should probably have a way to extend, to be able to like use reference secrets from the parameters. So we'll definitely add it to the cap as well.
Cool.
And then there's a folder with templates, and that's just like bunch of YAML templates that uses the same templating language as Helm uses, and you basically reference the YAMLs from the operator YAML. And
that's Go templating, right? Not Mustache.
I think it's Go templating with some like a little bit of extension. It's not pure Go templates what Helm uses. It's like, yeah, it's Go template. It's not Mustache anymore. Yeah, and that's pretty much what's in here. Yeah, there's some discussion about webhooks, but we might push it to like the next stage. Oh yeah, and we're talking about basically supporting customize as well. That's usable when you wanna extend. What was the motivation? I forgot that.
Yeah, when you want to extend a base framework by adding your own customization on top, if you will.
Exactly. So it's going to be Go templates plus customize. So you're going to be you can provide patches as well as the templates.
And so this is going away from Q then, or are we thinking of Q at some later
basically
point?
Q was the second path. I wasn't really part of that discussion, so maybe Tom knows more there. But this is like we decided to go this way right now instead of using Q.
Okay.
Yeah, and the discussion was about there. We eventually see several ways to define a framework, and we don't want to limit framework developers from doing that because we don't want to hard code in our rendering language. So we want to be able to provide those hooks to developers eventually. So we wanted to just pick one that we felt comfortable in with the expectation that we will be expanding that opportunity to do Q, to do a webhook, to do their own custom rendering elsewhere. So we wanted to pick one that was standard, and we liked Helm because it allowed for the things we really liked about Mustache and the real things we liked about Customize in that same language. And some of the benefits that we enjoyed from Q, like the default templates and kind of that extension and capability was nice to have, but not necessarily as easy to encompass some of these other components. And then the final straw was if we have this language, we should be able to easily extend a Helm chart and essentially open up an entire repo of opportunities for customers to come on board and try out KUDO by taking this Helm chart and then adding some plans or operations to it. And that can be our early use case for, why you should come on board and try KUDO, because you can use all your Helm charts and then you can add your backup and restore processes right there. Without having to change anything.
So since the cap is so fresh, I haven't read entirely through it, but so it means that we package a KUDO framework as a Helm chart, or just get inspired from the structure how Helm charts look like.
Inspired. Helm won't be able to use KUDO, but in theory, KUDO could use Helm.
I see.
The other thing that I was vaguely thinking about, and again, this may make no sense in this context, but the discussion that I raised earlier about having the ability to read in external secrets or whatever from some third-party place where I'm storing those into parameters, also kind of throws up the thought that you may. How do you deal with hierarchies in that kind of stuff? So, as an example, say if I've got, I'm running 20 instances of a particular operator, and for each of those operators, I have a different set of parameters that I'm storing externally and pulling in from some external thing. And I guess the analogy to this would be something like in Puppet World, you ended up with using a tool called Hira, which held all your parameters are actually external to your code, and they're just pulled in based on what role a particular set of code might have, or so you can end up with just having almost no code changes to in this context it would be your instance.yaml, but everything's just pulled in from some external place where you're storing encrypted parameters. Just something to consider maybe.
Yeah, and I like that idea about using external secrets like Vault. And I know Vault has some integrations with Kubernetes to inject secrets with permissions based on service accounts. I worry about trying to support that as a KUDO native thing rather than being compatible with some of those other tooling that provide something similar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what there is out there that provides that in terms of deployment YAML. I'm not sure what that workflow would look like in that world. I mean, the examples that I've seen of using Vault and Kubernetes are mainly about injecting stuff into containers once they're up, rather than before you've instantiated an object.
Yeah, I should find that. I read some article about providing service account the ability to, yeah, no, you're right. That was all at runtime. I don't know.
Yeah, whereas
I
guess what I'm getting at is like, this is at instantiation time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Guys, can I ask a question? Like, can you put an example where KUDO would need to read the secrets for operator? Like,
so I guess you might have user accounts and passwords. You might have I mean, I guess it also depends on your context. Would you be storing this stuff in a Git repository that other people have access to? You may want to not allow everybody to see endpoint IPs or something like that, in a particular context. It could be a whole bunch of
let's say endpoint IPs, like, let's say I want to inject that to my operator, not to KUDO, right? So I will tell the operator, like, when you are in the runtime, go there and find the API endpoints, like, from this secret, and the operator should have all the permissions to like access that secret. And KUDO, like, I'm trying to imagine, like, why KUDO would need to read secrets that are namespace limited for operator, right? That would create a that's like a bit of like hard to grab, like why is a controller is reading our secrets? Like, the framework developer would ask, like, why KUDO need that? But yeah, I understand, like, if KUDO needs a secret, then yeah, it should be in the KUDO proper namespace, or like in its secrets where it can access. But I'm just trying to imagine where an operator scaped secret is needed by by KUDO.
I mean, I guess this is more a usability thing than an internal technical capability. I'm just trying to imagine. I'm an enterprise user, and I want to store loads and loads of operators within different contexts. And how would I go about, do I want to have loads of instance.yamls hanging around with unencrypted passwords or whatever in them?
Okay, so let's say your restore YAML is, or something like that, or your restore plan is depending on something that is like enterprise content, and you don't want it to open it up to others.
Yeah, exactly. I want to restrict. I might not want to store those secrets in a piece of static code that's sat around in a Git repository.
Sorry, it sounds to me like this is a very, very good conversation, and we don't have really a cap for secrets. Do you guys think it's worth discussing all this also in a cap, if there's already so much to discuss? Because we don't have a place where we captured all this right now, and I think those are very good thoughts. And I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry for that. I mean to be rude. Just
that's fine. I think like there are like two levels. Just wanted to point out, like, we should let users authorize KUDO to have access to something, and that should be via secrets. And then there's another level, that is where the operators need some secrets, and in their YAML or their like plans, they would just point out that's the secret, and we would just provide it to the Kubernetes level, and that's up to the frameworks that they configure the secrets correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So these are two different levels. So yeah, I just thought that we are talking about the same level. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, sounds to me it would make sense to discuss that regardless of the level in a cap.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is correct, because we have this somewhere mentioned in the cap, but we don't talk much about it, and we could like talk a lot about this in this cap and just bloat up this cap, or we just like pull it out there and make our own cap. And I think now it's the point reached where we maybe do that, if that fits overall in everything else. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
That's it for my part. Thank you, Matt, for explaining.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Hey,
Yes.
Jarvis. Yeah.
Hey, sorry guys, I'm driving, so I may be. There is one scenario here that is a little bit more simple, where you can at least do some of this today before that cap, and that is just making a parameter a secret reference, and then it's up to the instance creator to create that secret before use. Now, that doesn't solve the RBAC issues, but what's nice about that is we can at least proceed today and then just enhance these secrets as we go, rather than this being anything blocking on this cap. Does everyone agree with that? Does that sound right? I know it doesn't cover the multi-level use case that was mentioned just before.
Yeah, but I see that like secret parameter that the instance need on the runtime is something that the operator needs it, right? So it's like the second level already. So let's say you have a MySQL password,
Right.
and you want to put it on somewhere. That password, KUDO should not see it at all.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. No, what I was thinking is like, I, as the application operator, create the secret that I want for my MySQL instance, and then my parameter becomes a reference to that secret rather than the secret itself. Much like in a deployment today or a pod spec today, where you can mount an environment variable from a secret, this would look a lot similar, and something that you could do today. But obviously, that has a limited that's limited and requires the user to go and create that secret beforehand, rather than having a framework be totally self-contained.
Yeah, I agree on that. Yeah, I think like that should be like every framework should, like the README or instruction on that. Like if you want to use that, you should create the secret beforehand and go ahead with that.
Okay. So I'm not quite sure what the conclusion is there. Then
I think I agree with a separate. Yeah, I think I agree with a separate cap for that, because there's a way to do this in this cap today, and so this other model is additive onto that and should be a separate cap. But we're not blocked from doing some level of secrets today that's more manual. So separate cap, and we can discuss that more.
Yeah, great. Okay. Okay. Anyone got anything more to add around that KEP 10, KEP 9 kind of space, or shall we move on?
Did we talk about extending with Helm charts at all?
Nope.
Okay, great. Yeah, I haven't written this because I had to leave, but I'm going to update this PR. There's an extensions and basis section in there, and a Helm section. And one of the scenarios we wanted to cover was being able to take any Helm chart, extend from that Helm chart, and add plans to it. This looks pretty much the same, just whatever your Helm chart is becomes a default deploy plan, and then you can add backup, restore, whatever onto it. The example repo that I posted, I think in the KUDO channel, and if not, someone can post it there, or I can post it when I get back. Of this, where the extension base is that MySQL chart, and we start adding plans to it. So I think it's a really powerful adoption into KUDO. It's limited in that you get basically your Helm chart plus plans. So there's definitely a point, as we were throwing in the kitchen sink, and Tom and I were talking about it, where you eventually move your Helm chart over to KUDO, but it looked like a really great onboarding mechanism to get people started with, okay, here's my chart, write some plans.
It's the one that you
But that,
paused.
I think,
The KUDO Builder Frameworks next MySQL repo.
Yep,
that's the
Okay.
repo, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I posted it here in the chat.
So I'll make sure before we merge the PR, that'll be in there with that example, because we're looking at multiple ways of doing extension points, and that's only one possibility there.
Okay. Right, let's move on to the next item on the agenda then. This is framework testing, Cat 8.
Yeah, I think Justin is on vacation and he submitted like an initial PR that's with the initial implementation of that. I think it's up for like a very early review. I don't have any other update to that.
Oh, this is PR 261.
Hmm, 261, yeah, that's it.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, in that case,
Sorry, I will just turn on the camera already. So I have one question around the testing. Like, it's not like directly related to testing, but the question is like how we are going to structure our frameworks. Like in the frameworks repo, it's going to be like tests living next to our definition of our operators, or every framework will have their own repo, because or we are treating just frameworks repo as a, like we treat like Helm charts repo or like Universe in case of DCUS, and there's no test or nothing like that living there.
A little bit of this is talked about in the KEP for testing, but our vision is to have maybe a couple core tests that make sure an instance can start up, and then be able to have framework-specific tests. And in order to get your PR into that framework stable, it needs to pass the tests inside of the framework's testing suite. Now, implementation details on that are few and far between, but that is the goal. Questions around who decides what a valid test is or not. It's got to be some framework owner, so there's got to be some sort of owner's file inside of there that can approve merges into the testing suite.
And what about functional tests, Tom? Is that within scope of that KEP 8? I mean, that's a whole world of complexity. Does my application actually function? And what do you use to test that? There's so many different.
Right.
Are you into the world of like server spec and all that horror?
Yeah, one of the frameworks, I think it was Zookeeper, I built a validation task that just ran after deployment and like did a "Are you okay?" type query into Zookeeper. I think it would be helpful to actually provide that level of functionality, and not just on the raw Kubernetes side, but actually being able to run jobs and commands against your instance, whatever it might be, especially with like the backup and restore tasks for MySQL. You really need to actually run things to know that the backups and restores happen correctly. It's not just
yeah. I mean, I guess that all also feeds down into, if we are collecting a not necessarily rubber stamped, but a set of operators that that are kind of validated in some sense. You know, how do you stop, you know, things rotting and stopping functioning, and you know, without having some kind of functional tester?
Yeah. So yeah, you could probably go in and make sure that that's as part of that KEP, and if not, I think that'd be a good addition there.
Okay, so I just need like high level. I think that's fine enough. So there will be like some kind of basic test that will living in where the framework definition is living. It can be a separate repo, or for example, frameworks repo, and then each framework developer can actually have another repo somewhere else, like more robust test, or what, like I think what Matt is saying, like functional tests. Like you really want to test that, you know, like all use cases are working in the operator. Okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and for framework extensions, we wanted the ability to add on new tests as you customize your extension of the framework. So if I add something custom to MySQL, I want to be able to test all the basic stuff if it's there from the core repo, and then add my extra tests for my functionality.
Got you.
If you look at Helm, I think they had this, and I shared that in, I think, the channel, like this charts test kind of like folder where they talked a little bit about charts testing. And so there they extracted the chart testing as its own project. So maybe that may be something that would at some point make sense, not now, but for us, they have this, where is it? I think Helm/chart-testing is a whole project that is actually dedicated for that purpose. I don't know if that is something that is maybe a good inspiration, or if we try to approach differently.
That makes sense, because like the YAML testing, like, or the basic tests would, like, I would call them as, you know, like a criteria of acceptance, but they won't cover all use cases. And soon we will need some more like robust tests, and they would be, you know, living in KUDO Builder or some other framework developer.
I think something like this is the journey where we're leading to, but for now it makes sense with the what Tom also showcased in the beginning with validation, so we can define and say, okay, this is a good running framework and it's healthy right now, and we have this validation plan.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
It's also requested to be able to run it against a running instance, so to make sure that the one you have installed on this cluster works correctly. And that way, if you're running a different, you know, flavor of Kubernetes, oh, I run OpenShift, oh, I wonder if it works there, you can do a stress test like Sonabui does. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yep. Yeah, I like this validation plan.
But then that does mean if you accept, you'd say that you know, validation tests could be written in anything. So people are going to end up like, you know, re-implementing the same thing over and over again. Like, does this port exist? Or like, you know.
So yeah, one interesting thing I saw when looking at Helm, they had their own Docker image for chart testing. So one idea would be that the framework developer creates its own Docker image for its own chart testing, and then when the validation runs, it just pulls that specific Docker image and tests it, for instance. And the logic there is implemented in that Docker image, and whatever bash scripts are added there without you actually having the need to like add that already somewhere into somehow your package. That's all outsourced and extracted to that Docker image. I think that would be an interesting way of doing more sophisticated tests.
There's no reason that can't just be a job that runs as a part of a plan. So we could capture all of that in a job.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bunch of stuff out there for doing, you know, for doing functional testing that gives you the ability to just describe what should be happening inside that container or inside that VM. You know, is this process running? Is this port accessible? You know, I mean, that's what stuff like Service Spec does. And
yeah, on separate note, like we are like scoping for as a framework developer for Kafka, how we are going to test the Kafka operator. And we are like looking forward to, you know, like how Kubernetes conformance tests are actually done. So what we are expecting is to launch something as a YAML definition inside the Kubernetes cluster, and it should do all the tests against the running Kafka cluster. So this way we make sure it's, like we can test it on all the flavors of Kubernetes, and it's not even, like limited to even to KUDO. Like, it's like a Kafka operator, and what I need is like an endpoint for Kafka, and we can do all the tests around that. And then there's another level where what we were talking about, the validation, that should be living near frameworks, where we can see like, if the CRD is created correctly, if the, like the brokers are up, and these kind of validations. Yeah.
I think my interpretation was a little bit different. So you're talking about a real health test on the instance after it's been deployed. Is that right, Zane?
Yeah. Like, but that should be like, that should be part of the framework actually. And that's what you can define different kind of like validations later.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess, yeah, that might go more towards a health plan that I've been brainstorming about what it means for an instance to be healthy or not, and how you might reconcile an unhealthy instance. For my testing frameworks, I was thinking more about validating plans get run successfully or not, which is somewhat related to, but somewhat different than actually the health of the instance itself. Because I want to validate that my scripts are executing what I expect them to do correctly. So it's not just that Kafka got deployed, but I could do a backup and a restoration of the Kafka logs. So validating that those day 2 operations function correctly is a little bit different than making sure that the instance itself is up and healthy, which is valid and very important as well to make sure the deploy plan runs. But it's, I was thinking maybe broader scope than that.
There's definitely something to be said, whatever, for having some kind of standard way of doing all this stuff. I mean, it's fine now to be able to validate 5 or 6 operators, but once you've got 300, 3,000 operators, maintainers disappear. How do you tell whether that thing still works or not? If you don't have some kind of standardization on test suites and what a test suite looks like.
Yeah.
But that's also a little bit what Zane said with conformance tests, right? Like seeing if Kafka is conform.
Yeah, but I was like more thinking like also like with the cap 8, I'm going to be able to validate if, like what Tom was saying, like, like if the backup is working or restore is working, so they can actually live nearby the framework definition. And I don't have to, like really work hard and think about like what happens, like with the metadata I'm reaching on the topic 1, if the replica is, under replicated, then, these kind of, advanced scenarios where I want to make sure when I lose a broker, then it's working nicely, or these kind of things that I don't see them living as a YAML definition near the framework. I see them more as like, conformance testing that need to happen to make sure that the new version or new PR that is being opened is still making sure this Kafka operator is still conformant and it's passing all the tests.
And changes to KUDO don't impact the functioning of frameworks. So that should also kind of be related.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you'd want some kind of runnable thing that's being run all the time against the operator library, against every PR that comes into KUDO.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the question regarding where the testing are going to. But yeah, now I'm clear that there would be like 2 levels, like high level testing where we are going to make sure that the framework is healthy, and they are going to be based on the cap 8, and then later framework developers can develop their own more robust test, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, I think the idea of a health plan is outside of the scope of testing though, but it's somewhat related to what you're talking about in terms of the health of the instance. So I don't know if you think it's worth opening one up, because I have this idea of a reconcile, or that's probably an overloaded word, recovery plan that gets run when your health check fails, your health plan fails several times, which is different than the pod health or whatever. You want functionality tests. And one example that I think people have mentioned is it might be Cassandra needs to get squashed or something if some response takes too long, and you guys help did this in the DCOS
Compensation.
but that would be something that maybe there's a health plan that checks for that, and then a recovery plan that does the command against Cassandra to squash the table. That would be something that I would think would be useful for a lot of these. Log rotation is kind of like a weird, like focused example of what this might look like. Just making sure that things are doing good, and if it gets out of sync, we kind of correct it with our own plan. So I think that's kind of its own KEP, but health of the system, health of the instance, and then how do we fix it if it's broken?
But yeah, I think it's really necessary to deliver with health checks, right? Like with the basic health checks that are on the Kubernetes level that are telling that, because like this, like the new pods, like, basic Kubernetes decision going to be based on those health checks to what you were saying, to take like redeploy a pod or, like reschedule a pod if it's not healthy and these kind of things. Yeah. So I think, yeah, they should be kept on that.
Okay. Anything else on testing? Okay, thanks, folks. Just keeping an eye on time here. Next two items on the agenda, I think, are actually not relevant anymore. Am I right? So
yeah, Denise also, I think, at KubeCon. So, but
yeah.
I think at last KUDO community meeting, I said I also will make a PR to dissolve this, and we merge that into other caps, I think.
So this is because KEP 7's been superseded by KEP 9.
Yeah, I haven't had a hold on Denis. Before I do that, just wanted to discuss that with him real quick and update him. But probably that will happen next week when there's more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So the last item on the agenda before any other business was Registry CLI update.
Yep. So I'll just say what from my part, I add, and then Elena can also maybe chip in. So there's PR 248 for the KUDO package manager, but with the current changes happening, I think this PR needs just to be adjusted on like just the structure and how the flow looks there. I shared in the channel this example how to install with the KUDO registry essentially a Kafka as it is today, but that of course is subject to change with the new structures that we use. But I see no one has yet commented on it, and that's probably also because this is just like the waterfall. It's maybe superseded by a new approach, or we cannot just make any decisions yet because other things, underlying things, have to change. But if anyone has already thoughts on 248 or wants to comment on it, you're of course invited to. And I update this cap also after I read through the new caps that just came up earlier today to make.
Yeah, I missed the 248, so sorry for that. I'll review.
Oh no problem.
Also, I see that this is the cap 9 that we were missing, so I guess we had 9 after all. But
it was a draft, and it was funny because I thought it was cap 9, and then boom, cap 9 was already there. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I guess we will have to renumber. But yeah, I think like a lot of around the packaging is gonna be affected by the cap 9, like the real cap 9, the other cap 9.
The real cap 9.
Yeah, we just renamed that, and if you look into the cap, I just gave it a cap number exactly because of this, because numbers are not yet drawn from the lottery. As soon as it's not implemented, it's provisional right now, so all good. Would be cap 11 then. It's even nicer. Cap 11. Like it.
So Fabi, I did read through it, and I kind of reached out to you on Slack, and I was like, I have no idea if any of this is going to work because we have all these decisions that dictate how we do package management. So
yeah, so that's why it's also maybe a little bit like lost brain power if we dedicate that now towards it, and maybe we rather just like stall or pause it until those other decisions are made, and then we can update it. That's also an approach, which looks super good to me as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess we've got about 10 minutes left for this meeting. So any other issues that anybody wants to raise, anything anybody wants to talk about?
Yeah, I will comment on one thing. Yeah, so it's regarding an issue I opened in the frameworks repo, like about which container image we are going to use for our operators. So in some cases, there will be like, like public community built containers that we will probably use. But in other cases, there won't be any kind of, like image available, or maybe enterprise images available. That's the case of, like the Kafka happens to be like, there's like actually, Apache Kafka container image, there's like Confluent, Bitnami, and then there's the other operators that are building their own image, like the Red Hat operator Strimsy. They are pushing their own image. So I wanted to ask about like what would be the approach around that? Like if we are going to have like KUDO/Kafka images at some point, or like whatever operator wants to do, like that are the official operators, or we would accept any operators that are like maintained by other like enterprise, like let's say Mesosphere/Kafka or Bitnami/Kafka to be accepted in the KUDO operators.
So
Are there any opinions around that?
Yeah, my opinion is that it's the framework owner's responsibility to decide that. And we're just in a weird state right now because we wear both hats. We made these frameworks, but I don't want to own these frameworks long term. As KUDO, maybe Mesosphere wants to own the Kafka framework, and you guys can decide how that should be managed. But there might be some guidelines that KUDO should impart on best practices, but I don't think KUDO should be mandating where container images are being built from, used from, etc. From the community, we might want to do security scans on them just to make sure no one nefarious has decided to put a crypto miner up there. But outside of that, but that is my opinion as a separation of roles and responsibility on the framework owner should be responsible for testing their framework, deciding configurations, building health checks, doing validation.
Yeah. This is how Helm works. Helm is not building any kind of like Docker images, or later the operators are building that. So yeah, that was just the question. But yeah, but maybe there could be some guidelines that it should be like as you said, the Docker file should be public, like, and these kind of, there should be some security scans, or we could ask her on that. Okay, makes sense. Any other opinions on that or recommendations? So I take this like there's not going to be any KUDO/ like operator image. Okay, so yeah.
But I don't want to change that because then I have to take responsibility for the framework, and I don't want to do that.
No, makes sense, yeah.
So Fabi's going to do it for us.
Great.
Okay. I just had one last thing to add. The community team at Mesosphere are going to get out on the road and do some meetups around KUDO in the US and in EMEA. But more excitingly, I'm hoping to have some KUDO swag. So if any folks from this community want to go out and promote KUDO, then we should have some stickers and T-shirts. I'll arrange some. We'll have a stash in the US and a stash in Europe. So please feel free to reach out to me if you're doing anything community related, and we'll see what we can do to hook you up with some fine free stuff. Okay, so we have a meeting host for the next meeting. Fabi, right? Jorg is going to do the next one.
Yes.
I guess we should have a standard call out for anybody else who wants to host these community meetings. Please hold your hand up, volunteer, and thank you all for listening to me. And hopefully, I didn't get this horribly wrong.
First meeting.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, well, thanks for hosting it, Matt.
No worries. Look forward to doing it again.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye,
folks.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.